So let us start. Thank you for that introduction. So welcome everyone and thank you for joining today's webinar. So today we'll discuss a topic that has become increasingly important across every asset-intensive industry, that is reliability as a business strategy. So this session is not simply about maintenance. It is about how reliability directly affects profitability, operational stability, safety, your customer satisfaction, and long-term competitiveness. So over the next hour, we'll explore what separates top-performing organizations from reactive ones, why many reliability initiatives fail, and what organizations can realistically do to improve. So let's begin by reviewing today's discussion flow. So let me briefly walk everyone through today's discussion. So we'll begin by discussing why reliability is far more than a maintenance issue and how it directly impacts business performance. Then we'll review key insights from the Solomon Reliability and Maintenance Study and discuss what separates world-class organizations from reactive operations. Now, for those unaware of who or what Solomon is, it is a leading global benchmarking and consulting firm for the energy and petrochemical industries. So basically, I have also worked with them before during the benchmarking of my previous company. Then from there, we'll examine the real challenge behind reliability transformation, followed by how world-class organizations embark on their journey to reliability excellence. Finally, we'll discuss benchmarking, maturity assessments, and why external perspective is so important in sustained improvement. So let's start with a very important idea. Reliability impacts far more than maintenance. So let's begin with how reliability drives business performance. One of the biggest misconceptions in industry is treating reliability as strictly a maintenance concern. But in reality, reliability affects nearly every part of the business. When assets operate reliably, operating costs decline, production becomes stable, customers receive consistent delivery, plant availability is maximized, and safety improves. But when reliability is poor, organizations become reactive, firefighting increases, downtime grows, costs escalate, and employees operate under constant stress. Now, reliability is not simply about fixing equipment. It is about enabling stable business performance. Now, organizations that understand this operate very differently from reactive organizations. Okay, so here's our first reflection question, okay? So basically, this is to encourage self-assessment and deeper thinking. Now, in your reliability organization, is reliability primarily viewed as a maintenance issue, an operations issue, a business strategy, or depends on who you ask? Now, in many organizations, reliability is still viewed primarily as a maintenance responsibility. But the reality is that unreliability impacts the entire business. Okay, so this model reflects what happens in almost every competitive industry over time. Here we have three companies operating in the same industry, producing the same types of products. So over time, market prices tend to decline. So basically, when you release a new product, the prices is high, but once the number of competitors increase, that tends to bring down the prices. So organizations that survive are usually the ones with the strongest cost position, meaning they have the lowest unit cost and the most stable operations. Now, Company A continuously improves reliability and operational discipline. So these organizations remain resilient even during downturns because, as you can see, they have the lowest unit cost and they have the bigger market share. Now, Company B appears stable, but often becomes complacent. So these type of companies make money most years, but usually they are not the best performer. So they have no strong desire or driver for change. So they are at high risk of becoming the next high-cost producer. Now, Company C operates reactively, constantly dealing with breakdowns, cost escalation, and operational instability. So their survival is uncertain as competitors indirectly influence whether they survive by how they set prices. So the important lesson is this: long-term competitiveness depends heavily on reliability performance. So now let's look at why reliability creates such enormous business value. One of the most overlooked opportunities in many organizations is reliability itself. Many organizations underestimate the business value created by reliability. When reliability improves, the impact extends beyond maintenance. So you have higher asset availability, which means production becomes predictable. So you don't have missed deliveries to expecting customers. You have less downtime, which means lower operating cost, and your employees spend less time in crisis mode, which creates better employee experience. Now, customer confidence improves because delivery becomes more consistent, so you increase market share. Now, but reliability becomes sustainable only when the entire organization owns it. So that's basically one requirement. There's an important lesson reliability can learn from safety. So years ago, safety was treated as the responsibility of the safety department. Over time, organizations realized that sustainable safety performance required everyone to take ownership. So now we have this slogan: safety is everybody's concern. Reliability today is following a path very similar to safety. So because you have operators, planners, supervisors, engineers, and technicians who all influence reliability through the decisions they make every day. So like safety, the best organizations now treat reliability as a shared responsibility. So now we have a new slogan: reliability, like safety, is everyone's responsibility. Now, let's discuss one of the most misunderstood concepts in maintenance performance. One major mistake organizations make is focusing only on maintenance spending. Now, true performance is measured by the total cost of maintenance. That includes both maintenance spending and the much larger cost of lost production. So maintenance spending includes the cost of labor, the materials that you buy, the tools, the contractors that you work with, the routine maintenance activities. And lost production has two components. First is cost due to over-maintenance, such as PM creep, extended turnarounds, and frequent short overhauls. Now, when I say PM creep, this is basically the continuously increasing number of PM tasks in your PM program. Normally, this is a reaction to major events wherein after an RCA or an informal investigation was done, the recommendation is normally to add PM tasks, which is wrong. This is not the proper way of adding PM tasks to the PM program. There is a structured way like RCM, FMEA, or PMO, wherein you can then add tasks or remove tasks if those tasks are not needed. So most of the time, what is added are non-value adding, and they just increase the workload for your employees. Now, second component of the lost production value is cost due to lack of maintenance, resulting in equipment failures and reduced production rates. Now, basically, lost production is very much bigger than the maintenance spending. So if you are only concentrating on maintenance spending, you are losing out on a very much larger opportunity for improvement. Now, world-class organizations do not simply minimize maintenance costs. What they do is they optimize for the balance between the maintenance effort and the production availability. So therefore, they should improve also the reliability. The goal is not less maintenance. The goal is optimized maintenance. So how is the optimization of the maintenance strategy done? Now, world-class optimization organizations understand the importance of balance. The optimal strategy is the one that minimizes the total business cost. So too little maintenance creates failures and instability. Too much maintenance creates unnecessary interventions, excessive outages, and wasted resources. Now, compare that with lower-class organizations who understand that optimization is the goal and not maximizing or minimizing maintenance activity. The objective is stable reliability at the lowest total business impact. So let's now look at what decades of benchmarking data actually show. So here are insights from the Solomon-Ram study. So the Solomon Reliability and Maintenance, or RAM study, provide some of the strongest evidence connecting reliability performance to business results. Here are the key findings of the study. Now, the data consistently shows that top performers spend less on maintenance while experiencing less downtime. Top performers focus on reliability strategy, disciplined execution, at saka proactive maintenance, which drives their profitability. Now, reactive performers, on the other hand, often spend far more on maintenance while still suffering significantly higher downtime. Now, so what does the financial impact actually look like in this study? So the financial gap between top and poor performers is enormous. Now, bottom quartile organizations can spend up to 4 times more on maintenance than top performers while still experiencing worse reliability outcomes. Now, just to be clear, when you do a benchmark, what is actually Solomon is doing is you are being compared to other companies within industry or other industries, and then you are grouped into quartiles. Now, quartiles is from Q1 to Q4, Q1 being the top performers, the best in class, or what you call the world-class companies, and Q4 is the worst performing or the bottom performers. Now, the performance gap identified in the Solomon study is approximately 7% of plant replacement value, or PRV. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with PRV, it is a metric to estimate the current cost of replacing all physical assets at a facility with new equivalent equipment at today's market price. So basically, I would replace my plant with a new one that is equivalent in capacity at current prices. So basically, that's PRB. Now, what's the purpose of PRB? So basically, it's a normalizing mechanism so that you can balance out and actually compare different companies, because you have small capacity plants and then you have large complexes. So obviously, the values are very much different, so that the PRB is now used in the calculation so that basically you balance them out and then you come up with a better comparison. Now, for that 7% performance gap that was indicated here translates into a financial impact that is equal to replacing the facility after 15 years, according to the study. So for large facilities, that's actually a massive untapped value. So this data shows that reliability is one of the most powerful financial levers available to an organization. Now, one of the clearest differences between top and bottom quartile performers appears when we look at downtime. Now, downtime often reveals the true maturity of an organization. Top performing organizations experience more than 60% less downtime. So why? It's not because they are lucky or have installed newer equipment. It comes from proactive maintenance strategies, effective outage management, disciplined execution, uh, that is both effective and efficient. Now, the best organizations systematically eliminate downtime rather than simply reacting to it. So as you can see here, the Q1 has very low downtime numbers, and that indicates that they actually use downtime as one of their primary goals in improving their performance. So there's another surprising finding from the benchmarking data, and this is related to the work hours and safety impact. Now, top performing organizations actually perform less maintenance work overall. A surprising finding from the benchmarking studies is that top performers actually perform less maintenance work overall. Why? Because reliability eliminates unnecessary work. Now, top performers spend around 50% fewer hours doing maintenance. Because they have fewer failures, it means fewer emergency repairs and corrective maintenance. At the same time, proactive maintenance becomes optimized, so only the value-added work is performed. This is why top-performing organizations normally have a PM optimization program in place so that they can continuously optimize their PM program, basically cleaning it up, removing all those non-value-adding work. And last, because you have less reactive work, this means fewer rushed, high-risk activities, and therefore improving safety performance. Okay, so let's now go into another reflection question. So what percentage of reliability improvement initiatives do you believe sustain long-term success? Is it 80%? Is it 50%? Is it 20? Or is it 10? Well, the correct answer here is approximately 20%. So the number surprises many people. So most reliability initiatives struggle not because organizations lack technical tools, but because changing organizational behavior is extremely difficult. Okay, so why does majority of reliability initiatives fail? So this next reality surprises many organizations. One of the hardest realities in reliability improvement is that most initiatives fail to sustain results. Now, the problem is not usually technical capability. The real challenge is organizational behavior. Many organizations invest heavily in tools and software while ignoring leadership, alignment, culture, and process discipline. So the idea here is that technology alone does not transform organizations. People do. So the hardest part of reliability transformation is rarely technical. So why are they not successful? So the technical side of reliability is usually the easy part. But reliability transformation is mostly about culture and disciplined processes. An important study from the Aberdeen Group highlights this clearly. Now, basically, this study is to know what technology maturity versus business process and culture maturity have affecting their basically a digital transformation projects. Now, organizations focusing only on technology often see disappointing results. This is like, from my experience, our company bought the high-end Bentley Nevada System 1 vibration monitoring system, but then we did not spend money on the training, and so that the technicians can interpret the patterns. What happens is that that system was never actually used, and its full potential was never actually appreciated. Basically the computer that was being used was called the most expensive screensaver in the plant because it's just always showing the screensaver. Now, organizations focusing on process discipline and culture improves significantly. But the biggest gains occur when organizations combine uh, technology, process discipline, and proactive culture and enabling technology. So basically, all those three. Now, the technical side is usually the easy part. Changing behaviors is the hard part. But the irony is that most organizations place as much effort in acquiring technology as it is easier to implement. Yeah, it's very easy to buy the latest advanced analytics, but asking the people uh, to use it is much more difficult. Now, the biggest reason why initiatives fail is basically not technical, it is organizational. Now, most organizations focus heavily on software, dashboards, condition monitoring tools, advanced analytics, and various other technical tools. But they spend far less effort on leadership alignment, accountability, people behaviors, work management discipline, and the culture itself. Now, technology can support improvement. It cannot actually create improvement. The most successful organizations understand that reliability is fundamentally a people and process challenge. Tools enable transformation, people deliver transformation. That is why culture ultimately becomes the differentiator between organizations that sustain improvement and those that revert back to reactive behaviors. So let's have another reflection question. In one word, what is the biggest barrier to reliability improvement in most organizations? So examples is firefighting. This is some of the answers. Leadership, planning, culture, resources, discipline, silos, and data. You'll notice many of these responses are organizational and behavioral, not technical. So that is extremely common across industry. Okay? So now let's proceed to the journey to reliability excellence. So reliability transformation is a journey. It is not a quick project. Okay? So organizations that succeed understand that transformation is a long-term journey and that reliability excellence does not happen overnight. It requires structured planning and disciplined execution, leadership commitment, and organization-wide engagement. Improving reliability requires, first, establishing a clear baseline through benchmarking and maturity assessment to understand where the biggest gaps exist. Now, targeted investments toward areas that create the greatest business impact. Now, it is not encouraged for you to cut costs so that you can improve performance. It is not recommended. Actually, you have to invest into assets that actually has existing problems because the purpose of reliability improvement is to permanently eliminate your existing problems. For example, you have a pump that is very difficult, that is having many problems because it is undersized. Now, a targeted spending will target that actual equipment. They will replace that with a pump that has the correct capacity. So basically, you permanently eliminate the problem that you currently have. Now, that is the purpose of targeted spending. Now, for the next step, we need to have stronger processes, discipline, and standardization. Okay? And also, the cultural shift to reliability-driven and proactive behaviors. Basically, this is the ones that was seen in the Aberdeen study. Now, the organizations that progress fastest are the ones that develop proactive reliability cultures. Now, most organizations underestimate the time required in undertaking a reliability transformation. So, reliability transformation is not a project. It is an organizational change journey. So, meaningful and sustainable improvements, it will require around 3 to 5 years or one full turnaround cycle until you see some improvement. Now, significant leadership commitment is also very necessary. Now, the good news is that benefits appear much earlier than that. Organizations often begin seeing improvements within the first year through better planning and scheduling, reduce reactive work, improve PM effectiveness, and better work execution. Now, however, true culture change takes much longer. The organizations that succeed are the ones that view reliability as a long-term business strategy rather than a short-term initiative. Now, so how do organizations actually accelerate improvement? Now, here's another reflection question. Which best describes your organization today? Is it mostly reactive firefighting? Is it high maintenance spend but inconsistent results? Is it transitioning toward proactive reliability? Or is it now strong reliability culture is already there and established? Now, the point here is where organizations start has a major impact on how difficult the transformation journey becomes. So if your organization is mostly reactive firefighting, then you are in a load of problem because uh, you will face the longest path because reactive behaviors become deeply embedded into the culture. So again, the behavior is a problem here. And this should be addressed. Now, what are the primary levers for improving reliability? Now, organizations improve reliability through two major levers. So the first is targeted spending. That is investments in upgrades for improved reliability, redesigns to eliminate defects, and technology to enable disciplined processes. The second is culture change. Without culture change, organizations often recreate the same problems repeatedly. The most successful organizations combine both. They invest strategically while continuously strengthening yung kanilang mga reliability behaviors and process discipline. Now, our key takeaway is this: technology and spending alone cannot sustain reliability. Eventually, organizations reach a point where improvement becomes self-reinforcing. So it's very good for you to ensure that everyone is on board and you have their commitment. Now that the path to top performance follows a structured path. Basically, it is not isolated improvement effort. So it's not like some reliability engineer will come up with an idea like, let's start a machine lubrication program. Because basically, organizations must first establish an accurate baseline through benchmarking or maturity assessment. Then they must identify the highest value improvement opportunities. And finally, they must execute a disciplined transformation roadmap with leadership alignment and measurable targets. So basically, if you embark on this journey, the consultant who help you in the assessment or benchmarking will provide a transformation roadmap. a roadmap includes all the projects that needs to be implemented. So it's basically improving the entire organization and all of your practices. So one of the biggest mistakes organizations make is implementing tools before understanding where the biggest value opportunities exist. So the first question should not be, what should we do? The first question should be, what is preventing us from performing better today? So the key takeaway is this. So without a baseline, organizations operate on assumptions. They don't know what to tackle first. Okay. So everything begins with understanding the current state honestly. So how does one establish the performance baseline? So there are two uh, answers there: benchmarking and maturity assessments. Now, one of the most important steps in reliability transformation is conducting an honest current state analysis. Now, before organizations can improve, they must clearly understand three things. First is your current performance. So this tells you where you are today based on your actual performance and current operating practices. Benchmarking actually will give you KPI metrics. So you will see in this example, reliability and uptime, what is your maintenance cost, how is your scheduled performance and safety performance, and how is your quality and rework. So basically, these are metrics. Now, the second step is the potential performance compared to best in class. Now, basically, this is one of the reasons why some initiatives does not succeed, because organizations actually do not have an idea of what is best in class performance. Okay, so it also have KPI metrics, but then it tells you what is uh, the best in class reliability is, and comparing that with your current reliability and uptime numbers. So basically, you have the current and then you have the potential performance. And that is where you establish the gap, what they call the gap. So the final part is the financial impact of the performance gap. So basically, based on the gap between current and potential performance, you get numbers that tells you how much you are going to get if you improve your performance from the current state into the one that you say will be best in class. So this could include the lost production opportunity. This is basically from your downtimes. You will know that, okay, these downtimes are costing us this much money. Our operating cost is high because we have too much overtime. Because of downtimes, we have so many scraps, and also the increased risk exposure. Basically, all of this will be shown to you as a financial gap. Basically, it's money. So if you go into a benchmarking or maturity assessment, what they will give you in the final report is basically a number. Like, okay, you have a performance gap, a total performance gap of around $60 million compared to the best-in-class companies. Okay, and this is what you need to do. They will provide you a roadmap and then telling you what will be the way forward. Now, this is where reliability becomes a true business discussion. So the goal is to close the gap to unlock the potential performance. The key takeaway is this: you can only improve what you measure and value. So once organizations understand their current state, the next step is identifying what is creating the gap. Okay? So performance gaps should not be viewed as failures. They are opportunities. Top performing organizations do not ignore performance gaps. They aggressively identify and address them. Now, common causes include poor data, which hide problems. So basically, one example of data is the failure codes. Now, failure codes basically are reports that is coming from your maintenance technician. So normally, the failure codes are inputted into your computerized maintenance management system or your CMMS. It's basically in the form of the component, for example, a bearing, the damage code, for example, fatigue, and then the cost code, for example, is lack of lubrication. So basically, the entire failure code is bearing fatigue due to lack of lubrication. Now, that data is being inputted by the technician after he completes the work and has already solved the problem. Now, why is it important? Now, if you don't have that data, like in my case, I experienced that in one of my previous companies, we don't have the failure code. So the problem is the reliability engineer has no way of extracting information which can tell him what are the most or what are the bad actors in the company's assets and what could be done to improve them. Because if he knows, for example, after 6 months, he comes up and asks the CMMS, what is my top failure modes in the past 6 months? And the system could then indicate your top failure code is bearing fatigue due to misalignment. So from there, he can then come up with strategy improvements to address that problem, since that is a major problem or a bad actor for them. Now, also, a common cause includes the weak execution discipline, which discourage the adoption of the process. We also have structural issues that create instability. Basically, this is mostly organizational. This is how the organization was made. So some examples of this is overlapping or duplicate roles. So in my experience, we have superintendents and we have supervisors, which basically have the same roles. Now, the problem here is that information coming from the technician would pass through his foreman, to his supervisor, then to his superintendent, and then before the reliability engineer will be able to get that same information. Now, also, there's also reactive behaviors that drive inconsistency. So this means that organizations must understand root causes of the gaps rather than simply reacting to symptoms. Now, that requires honest assessment of an objective analysis. So understanding gaps leads naturally into benchmarking and maturity assessment. So what is benchmarking and maturity assessment? Benchmarking and maturity assessments are related, but they answer different questions. First, benchmarking measures results against peers. So there is the question of how do we compare? So you're being compared with your peers. Now, maturity assessments, on the other hand, evaluate the processes, systems, behaviors, and culture producing those results. So the question is, how capable are we? Now, benchmarking tells you where you are. Maturity assessment explains why you are there. Both are essential. Now, here is a simple comparison of the two tools for establishing an organization's baseline. Now, high-performing organizations use both to build a credible reliability strategy. Benchmarking shows the gap to world-class performance. Maturity assessment identifies the root causes behind that gap. So for example, benchmarking shows high maintenance cost and low availability. Now, maturity assessment can then reveal That is because you have poor planning, you have high reactive work, and you have weak operator ownership. Now, understanding capability becomes essential for sustainable improvement. So let's do another reflection question. So if an external team benchmark your organization today, what would surprise leadership most? Is it downtime losses, PM effectiveness, reactive work levels? Is it maintenance cost, cultural behaviors, planning and scheduling discipline? Now, one of the biggest benefits of benchmarking and maturity assessment is that they expose blind spots organizations no longer recognize internally. Now, take note of this. This is one of the most important aspects of why organizations fail, and because they have these blind spots and they no longer recognize internally. Now, I will have a section on this, on how this happens, why organizations suddenly have blind spots. So I already discussed initially about benchmarking. So basically, you compare yourself from industry metrics. Now you have the maturity assessments. So maturity assessments create organizational clarity. It reveals various aspects of an organization that are barriers to reliability excellence, such as hidden losses, your process weaknesses, the reactive behaviors, the cultural barriers, and the improvement opportunities. Now, maturity assessments evaluate various asset management elements, such as work management, planning and scheduling, maintenance strategy, leadership alignment, and reliability culture. So the goal is not simply evaluation. The goal is creating a practical roadmap for transformation. Now, here's an example organizational diagnostic dashboard showing the maturity levels on 6 assessment areas covering 30 plus capability elements. Okay. So the assessment areas is planning, scheduling, preventive maintenance program, the culture, the leadership, the reliability. So these assessment areas are just, so this is just the areas that was actually contracted for the consultant to do. There are in fact many asset management elements that can be actually assessed. Now, in fact, my company has around 40 of them. Some of the examples of assessment areas that we have like PM optimization, precision maintenance, defect elimination, machinery lubrication, operator care rounds. So basically, we will assess these things if you have this type of programs in your organization. Now, you might ask, what if that is the areas, what are capability elements? Because from here, from 6 areas, they have 30 plus. Now, let's look at a sample assessment checklist. So here is a reliability assessment checklist from us. So the main area is planning and scheduling. The sub area is CMMS usage, and we have 9 capability elements. So for example, element number 4, the work order life cycle. So the audit question here is, does the entire work order life cycle, meaning the request, approval, planning, scheduling, execution, and closeout, occur within the CMMS? Are work orders updated in real time to reflect progress, status changes, or delays? So basically, those are what we call the capability elements. So this could be, in our case, for something like you having 40 assessment areas, that could mean around more than 300 elements at most. But not all of them needs to be assessed. That's why, as I've shown you earlier, there are only 6 areas that was agreed to be assessed for that particular organization. Okay, so now let us now proceed to the Deming system of profound knowledge. And this is the one that will explain the blind spots in organizations that I mentioned earlier. So this quote from Deming captures one of the most important principles in reliability transformation. That is, a system cannot understand itself. Now, this quote emphasizes the importance of external perspective in understanding and optimizing organizational processes. Deming's philosophy of profound knowledge suggests that a system cannot comprehend itself without external input, as prior experiences can bias objectivity and prevent critical analysis. Basically, this is how we do it and for years. So organizations naturally adapt to their own inefficiencies over time so that reactive behaviors becomes normalized and systemic problems turn into blind spots. Now, this external perspective is crucial for transformation and improvement within organizations. So let's look at what happens when reactive behaviors become normalized. Over time, organizations become accustomed to their own problems. So inside the organization, normalized failure becomes how we operate. Workarounds is viewed as competence. So the root causes of problems are hidden and not solved. Firefighting becomes heroism and is being rewarded. So you have this group of people, they're attending a awarding ceremony for a technician who was able to restore an equipment at the shortest amount of time, saving the company from a long duration shutdown. Now, it could be a certificate or some monetary gift, but the point is this: isn't it better if that failure was prevented in the first place? Now, PM creep increases the workload without adding value, and the organization sees this as being productive because they will say, oh, my technicians are so busy. So that's why I believe my maintenance is going to prevent failures. Okay, so performance is also judged internally against previous performance measures and not against peers or industry best practice. So here, this in this photo, you will see a operations manager happily reporting that their plant availability KPI has increased by 5% from the previous year. But unknown to them, world-class organizations achieve better than 95% plant availability. So that is why this is what we call blind spots. Now, people learn how to survive inside the system rather than improve it. So the danger is that inefficiencies becomes invisible. This is exactly why benchmarking and external assessments are so valuable. They expose blind spots the organizations may no longer recognize. So, for another reflection question, what behaviors have become normal in your organization that probably should not be normal? So, example, frequent breakdowns, excessive overtime, constant firefighting, scheduled breaks, emergency purchasing, PM overload. So, this normalization of dysfunction is exactly what Deming was warning about. So, if you see something here that you consider normal, so basically that is proof that systems naturally adapt to their own inefficiencies over time. Oh, there's one more, agriculture. Okay. So benchmarking, assessments, and consulting each serve different but complementary roles. So benchmarking shows the size of the performance gap. Assessments identify the root causes, and consulting accelerates organizational learning by bringing the external perspective and proven best practices. Now, that external knowledge matters, but the organization itself must own the change. The change will not be sustainable if the organization has no part in the development process. During my time, employed in one industrial company. I have worked with several consultants already, and all of them make it a point to insist that implementation of the roadmap should be done by the organization themselves with some guidance from them. Basically, they want you to own the change. But no consultant can transform an organization that is unwilling to challenge itself honestly. Okay? And I would like to stress this point. Consultants do not own the solution, the organization does. So, as we conclude, let's return to the central message of today's webinar. So, the evidence is very clear. Reliability is not simply a maintenance issue. It is one of the strongest drivers of long-term business performance. Organizations that build proactive reliability cultures, they consistently outperform reactive competitors. So the goal here is not perfection. The goal is building a system that continuously learns, improves, and prevents failure better than competitors. For our last reflection question, so what is the single biggest reliability opportunity in your organization today? So the important thing here is that it's not perfection. It's not perfection. Okay, so the important thing is clarity. You must understand where the organization is today, where the biggest opportunities exist, and committing to sustained improvement. Okay, so that's my presentation. Thank you again for your time and participation today. I hope this session helped reinforce the idea that reliability is not simply about maintenance activities. It is about building stable, competitive, and sustainable organizations. I'd now be happy to open the session for questions and discussion.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Hiner. Sir Hiner, hindi niyo po ata nakita naka-off cam kayo. Hindi nila makita yung kagwapuhan niyo, sir.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Sir Hiner, for that insightful presentation. And one of the key takeaways from today's session is that reliability transformation is not simply about tools or technology. It is about building disciplined processes, proactive behaviors, and a culture focused on prevention rather than reaction. So I have here a few questions. We'll now move to our Q&A session. So please feel free to send your questions to our chat box so we can address them. And I've got one question here. This is from Al Leiko. How to tackle the challenge of silver tsunami? Do we have Al Leiko here?
Again?
I don't know.
What is that?
Let me give you another question, sir. What key competencies should maintenance and operations teams prioritize to successfully sustain a reliability-centered culture? I'll just paste it here as well.
So basically, operations and maintenance should be a team. That's the first thing. Okay. Operations should be able to do basic maintenance work. Those are basically tasks that does not require actual maintenance knowledge. So these are mostly done with the senses, with the 5 senses. Oh, maybe please don't three of the senses. Because operations are the ones that are closer to the equipment, and they know when there are changes in how it sounds, in how it feels, in how it and how hot it is. So they're the first one who will discover issues, and this is very important. This is the principle behind defect elimination. If you have a defect elimination program, the frontline employees are basically the ones tasked with finding defects in the area of their in their areas, and they themselves should be the one who will try and correct those defects before they become a bigger issue. So uh, reliable maintenance technicians and operators are actually supposed to be a team. Uh, they should not be in competition with one another, which is normally what is in most organizations. If something fails, operations will say, "Oh, it's poor maintenance," and then maintenance, on the other hand, will say, "Oh, that's because operators do not know how to operate." Okay, so basically, that is what they can do in that level. Okay, ensure that defects at the incipient phase are already addressed and not allow them to linger and become bigger problems for the organizations later on.
Thank you for answering that question, Sir Henner. I have another one in here. This is from Dennis Bombita. If you were managing a maintenance department today, what three KPIs would you prioritize to improve reliability without significantly increasing maintenance costs?
Three, basically three initiatives or
Three KPIs po.
three KPIs. KPIs. I thought it was as initiative. So if it's KPI, uh basically it should be involved with mostly the process work execution management. Okay, because uh, what you call this? When this is maintenance management that you tackle, uh, wait. Again, is this KPI or is it not an initiative? It is KPI.
Yes, sir. It says here, if you were managing a maintenance
Oo.
department today, what three KPIs would you prioritize to
Okay.
improve reliability?
Okay. So in my opinion, I think it will be best if you improve the work management part of your organization, specifically, basically your work identification, KPIs related to work identification, planning and scheduling, how you prioritize your work, and your execution quality. This is because work management is where strategy becomes action. Even the best maintenance strategy, PM program, or reliability initiative will fail if work is not consistently planned and executed well. So organizations that improve work management typically experience less reactive work, higher schedule compliance, lower maintenance costs, improved reliability, and of course, better workforce utilization. So those are actually KPIs already. So it often becomes the foundation upon which all other reliability improvements are built.
Okay, Sir Henner, thank you for answering the question. I think we can still accommodate one more question this is from Precious Nina Pagulayan. What key competencies should maintenance and operations teams prioritize to successfully sustain our reliability? I think it was, yeah, to successfully sustain a reliability centered culture.
What competencies?
Yes. Should maintenance and operations teams prioritize?
For competencies, I believe it's basically for in the operation side is how to ensure that equipment is properly operated, not exceeding limits of operation. And also, as I mentioned earlier, asset care. So as I've said earlier, uh, reliability, like safety, is everyone's concern. So asset care is very important because you are the first line of defense. That is for the operations. Now uh, for the maintenance, it is basically improving your work processes. Uh, and there are many that can be targeted. So I can give one example. This is basically uh, doing quality assurance of work done by your technicians after a work is completed. This is basically one of the reasons why uh, many organizations suffer what they call the infant mortality, meaning uh, after you do a maintenance work and you put it in services, it suddenly goes down. Now, this is one major problem. That's why operations suddenly doesn't seem to appreciate the preventive maintenance being done on their equipment. I have this experience uh, wherein the operations release an equipment for preventive maintenance as it is a scheduled maintenance. And after the job was completed, it was returned to service, and then a few days later, it failed. Now, that equipment actually was running for years, and there's no issue. So basically, when that kind of issues come up, uh, that false impression from operations comes in. Actually, in my previous experience, uh, managers call PM para masira. Okay, it's not preventive maintenance, but para masira. So their expectation is, and that's why they sometimes refuse to give equipment, especially if the equipment was running normally to maintenance. That's an issue. So for maintenance, there are actually many elements in the asset management uh, area that needs to be improved. Uh, I cannot discuss many of them here, but that is one example that needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Sir Hiner. And I think we have an insight here from Sir Jason Mendoza. There's a question. In your previous project experiences, how were you able to change the culture from top management down to shop floor people? Like what key concepts can help speed up culture change?
What can speed up again?
In your previous project
Uh-huh.
experiences, how were you able to change the culture from top management down to shop floor people? What concepts can help speed up culture change?
Culture change. So basically, when you are trying to improve culture change, uh, it must be it must be communicated to the people. There should be constant communication uh, of what the changes are going to be happening. Okay, sorry. Um, Also, on part of the leadership, uh, they must actually be convinced to be part of the transformation. Uh, it should be about being a sponsor of the change, because if the leaders do not become sponsor, especially the executive level, then the the change will not be sustainable. Okay, because I have an experience before. We have this improvement initiatives. We were able to convince our plant our plant manager to be the sponsor of the project. This is basically about operator care program. And then after a while, the I noticed that after a few months, the initial changes that we introduced are already not being implemented by operations. They are no longer doing the tasks that are assigned to them. And when I reported this to the top management, our sponsor, the reply to me was, so it died a natural death, which is really not what is expected from leadership. You are the sponsor. You should be the one who should be able to keep the organization behind the initiative. So it's very important that leadership is involved in the change and that everyone is always informed of what the changes are, since it will be affecting their work, and they are the ones who can be either promoters, or they could be the ones who will resist the change. So success will really depend, I think, primarily on both.
Thank you. Well, everyone, as much as we'd love to accommodate all of the questions, I don't think we have enough time. So you can actually send a direct message to Sir Hiner, and he will be more than happy to answer all of your questions about it. Thank you so much. Thank you to every participant who sent their questions through our chats, and to Mr. Hiner for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. So now we want to introduce the extension of future opportunities about reliability with our partner organization, Erudite Reliability Services and APMD. And on behalf of the Association of Maintenance and Reliability Practitioners of the Philippines and Mr. Wins Bernal, the president of AMRPP, I would like to personally invite you to join us on July 21st for our 4th General Membership Meeting and Fellowship Night. So this gathering is more than just a meeting. It is actually an opportunity to connect with industry peers, exchange ideas, learn from one another, and strengthen the growing community of professionals dedicated improving asset performance, maintenance excellence, reliability, and operational sustainability across the Philippines. So whether if you are an engineer, a maintenance practitioner, reliability professional, asset manager, consultant, educator, service provider, or even industry leader, this event is designed to help you expand your network, discover new opportunities, and be part of meaningful conversations that shape the future of our profession. And after the formal program, please stay with us for our fellowship night, where members and guests can build friendships, celebrate successes, and enjoy a relaxed evening with fellow practitioners who share the same passion for excellence. So now, if you are not yet a member of AMRPP, this is also the perfect time to join our growing professional community. For professionals and practitioners, we invite you to become an individual member and gain access to technical learning opportunities, industry resources, networking events, certifications, and opportunities to contribute to industry best practices. And for our senior leaders, executives, and decision makers, we encourage you to explore our executive membership. We're designed for professionals who wish to help shape the direction of the profession while connecting with fellow industry leaders and influencers. And not just that, for organizations that provide products, technologies, and services supporting maintenance, reliability, asset management, and integrity management, we welcome you as a supplier member, giving your organization opportunities to engage directly with practitioners, support industry development, and build meaningful business relationships. So as of the moment, we actually have an ongoing promotion wherein you can get 50% off for the membership discount. So whether you will be joining as individual, supplier, or corporate member. You will be able to get that. So now, please mark your calendars. Join us on the 21st of July, 2026 for the 4th General Membership Meeting and Fellowship Night. And also to everyone that wants to be a case presenter for the upcoming APM LeadCon 2026. This will happen on July 21st up to the 23rd. We are calling for an abstract that tackles leadership in engineering, sustainable asset and risk management. It can also be asset integrity and equipment reliability, and plant operations and finance excellence. Please, you can send an email to Sophia at erudite.com.ph. And you can also visit our website, apmlead.com, for more information. Okay. So now, maybe call on, we will present now the certificate for Sir Henner Magadia. Sir Henner.
Yes.
Hi, Sir Henner. Well, again, thank you so much on behalf of AMRPP. The certificate is presented to Mr. Henner Magadia in grateful recognition of your invaluable contribution as a resource speaker during the webinar entitled Reliability is a Good Business Strategy. So held on May 29, 2026, conducted by the Association of Maintenance and Reliability Practitioners of the Philippines. Let's give him a round of applause, everyone. Virtual round of applause. Thank you so much, Sir Henner.
Okay.
Okay. So everyone po who also attended, we will be giving you your certificates virtual. So we will send it via email. And please join us this coming July 21st po. For more info, we will be sending you an invitation via email. And please scan the QR to let us know how we did today. So there you have it. So again, thank you everyone who participated in today's webinar. We hope today's discussion provided valuable insights into how reliability and maintenance performance directly influence operational excellence, business performance, and long-term competitiveness. We sincerely appreciate your time and participation. Again, on behalf of AMRPP and Colbridge Industrial Systems Incorporated, and with our partnered organization, Erudite Reliability Services and APM Lead, thank you once again. And we hope to see you in our future webinars and training programs. So please, can we flash again the evaluation? Thank you. There you go. Okay. And then I will ask a little more time. Can we please turn on our cameras para meron tayong photo op? Sabi ang init, no? Happy Friday, everyone. I know hindi na tayo fresh. Pero isang picture lang po. Ayan. Wow. Ang dami natin today. Thank you all for joining. There you go.
Thank you po.
Okay. Okay. Ako na magpipicture. Wait lang. Okay. 1, 2. Okay, one more. Another one. 1, 2. Okay, thank you so much for today, everyone. And I hope that we can see you on our upcoming APM Lead on the July 21st up to the 23rd. And there's so much will happen. And I hope that we can see you there for the AMRPP fellowship night as well. See you, and once again, thank you so much.
you so much.
Thank you, Sir
Mm.
Henner.
Sir
Thank
Henner.
you.
Thank you, Sir Jason.
Thank you, Sir Henner.